In this episode 2 of a three-part series, I'll talk about painting, weathering, and finishing the model. In the next episode, I'll share with you how to build a tarmac base from scratch for the A-5C. Hello and welcome back. I'm Khavar and I've been a scale modeler for over 32 years now. You can find out more about me on my website. Details are given in the description below. After a black priming step, the cockpit interior was painted medium grey. The main and side consoles as well as the cockpit floor were finished in matte black. The seat was finished in faded blue-grey, the cushion olive drab, and the face screen and firing handle were painted red. The seat was dry brushed with light grey to accentuate the wear and tear. Seat belts were airbrushed in linen with aluminum buckles. Scratches on the control stick and the cockpit floor were dry brushed using acrylic chrome silver. The inside frame of the canopy was painted matte black and the oxygen hose was painted in olive green. Avionics boxes were dry brushed with acrylic silver and grey. The entire model, together with the fuel tanks, was primed with Alclad black primer and microfiller. To achieve an ultra-smooth surface finish, the primer was very lightly sanded with Infinimodel sponge sandpaper. Since the surface of PAF A5 aircraft typically showed solid colors with not too much variation, the underlying mottling effect on the fuel tanks was subdued significantly on the finished model. The camouflage edges were made soft on the fuel tanks by holding the camouflage pattern strips slightly above the plastic surface before painting. A darker version of the base color was diluted and used to accentuate the panel lines and the dirt and grime around them. Correct size photo etched fuel ports taken from a Gumpler photo etch fret were added on the underside of the tanks to enhance realism. The underside of the fuel tanks was shaded with highly diluted brown and black to mimic the weathering patterns found on the reference images. The nose pitot and standby pitot tubes were first painted off-white and then sealed with Tamiya gloss coat to prevent the masking tape from peeling the paint off. 0.6 mm wide strip of masking tape with reduced adhesion was cut out to paint the red barber's pole design. The tip was painted titanium silver. The gun barrels were finished in steel and dry brushed with aircraft aluminum. The foreign object debris or FOD covers were scratch built with plastic painted in red and dry brushed with light grey. The handles were built with plastic and painted matte black. On a side note, PAF actually modified the avionics of this aircraft so that it could carry AIM-9P Sidewinder missiles, but that required inclusion of additional pylons on the wings, shown here in grey and red. Of course, the kit does not contain these extension pylons either. The nose gear strut comprises two parts. Assembling the two parts together left a noticeable gap which required filling. But if the two parts were assembled first, it would become impossible to position the nose wheel between them. The gap was therefore very carefully filled, then sanded and painted after a painted and weathered wheel was positioned between partially painted nose gear parts. A scratch-built landing gear light was also installed. Hydraulic and electrical wiring was made from 0.05 mm rigging cable and 0.5 mm brass wire. Additional detail on the nose and main gear struts was added by including painted electrical resistors of 0201 and 0402 package size. Hydraulic lines, electrical wiring and oxygen bottles like those found on the MiG-19 were also included in the wheel wells. Landing gear struts, doors and wheelbase were painted blue-grey and were given a wash with Ammo MiG deep brown panel line color. Oleos were realized using carefully cut aluminum foil and diluted white wood glue. The foil areas were later coated with a matte coat to get them to blend in subtly with the gear, preventing them from starkly standing out. Oxygen bottles in wheel wells were painted light blue, hydraulic lines were painted silver, which was followed by adding a rust effect with a sponge. The electrical wiring was painted black. The wheel discs were painted medium green and washed with Ammo MiG deep brown panel liner. Chipped paint was not very common on Pakistan Air Force A5 aircraft, which is why it was not replicated on the model. However, grime and dirt were abundant, which is why the landing gear struts and wheel wells were heavily dirtied using excess panel line color. An interesting feature of this aircraft is the asymmetric assembly of the nose gear doors, which was accurately replicated with correct angles on the model. This fine detail is not mentioned at all in the kit instructions. After the priming and sanding stage, a mottling layer was airbrushed using a combination of white, light grey, light blue, light brown, light green, and light yellow. Masking tape strips were used to carefully realize the three-color camouflage scheme on the top surface using the colors specified in the manual. The process of achieving the camouflage pattern is illustrated with this simple cartoon. The wingtips and the forward tips of horizontal stabilizers were painted red. Finally, a highly diluted acrylic black was carefully airbrushed on selected areas on the top surface of the model to match the weathered look that is so obviously noticed on numerous reference pictures. The underside was painted light blue and specific panels were masked out and shaded slightly differently to enhance realism. A lot of references were consulted for this step. The exhaust region was painted alclad burnt iron. The entire model was then airbrushed with a gloss coat, 1 part acrylic thinner to 1 part Tamiya gloss clear coat. The flag and roundels on the kit decal sheet are designed with a much lighter shade of green, which is inaccurate. The shape of the crescent and the position of the star on the flag are also incorrect. An aftermarket MiG-19 decal sheet from print scale was used for the limited stencil detail, roundels and the tail fin flag. The remaining decals came from the kit decal sheet. Decals were sealed in place using Mr. Hobby decal setting and softening solution. After a second diluted gloss coat, Ammo MiG deep brown panel liner was used on the top surface, while dark sea blue panel liner was used on the bottom surface. The fuel tanks, landing gear and gear doors were then installed and aligned. I used ochre, black, white and green Winsor & Newton oil colors to realize streaks, grime effect and oil leaks on the top and bottom surfaces of the model. Finally, the model was airbrushed with 1 part acrylic thinner to 1 part Tamiya flat clear. The static probes located just ahead of the cockpit were painted titanium silver, while the old Chinese radio antenna located to the right of the rear end of the canopy was painted flat white. The static discharges were painted titanium silver with dark aluminum at the rear end. Wingtip lights were painted with a base coat of silver followed by clear red and clear green. A photo etch fret was used to scratch build the UHF antenna. This is the one on the underside closest to the nose pitot and is specific to the PAF A-5C. It is not found on the Q5C variant. A similar approach was used to prepare the radio altimeter, which is installed between the UHF antenna and the nose wheel bay. This antenna is also specific to the PAF A-5C. That's it for now. Thank you for watching this video. Please post your comments, suggestions and questions below and I'll get back. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please consider doing so. Stay tuned for part 3, in which I'll talk about model presentation and how to build a tarmac base from scratch. Take care.